People say Las Vegas has always been about money, but here's the dirty little secret. Vegas was actually better when the Mafia ran the casinos. From the 1960s through the 80s, the mob wasn't just taking their cut, they were making sure everyone in town got taken care of. Employees got respect, tourists got comps, and the streets were safer than they are now. Today, corporations nickel and dime you with resort fees, overpriced drinks, and loyalty programs that don't mean anything. Back then, a pit boss could comp your entire weekend if you looked like you were having a good time. We tracked down both tourists and employees from those days, cocktail waitresses, dealers, pit bosses, even bartenders, and they all say the same thing: Vegas was better under the Mafia. And tonight, you're about to hear their craziest stories from the mob era. Pay very close attention to how the customers were treated back then and compare it to your most recent experience of visiting the Strip. And you tell me which one sounds like a better time in the comments. Do you prefer the 20th century Mafia-run Vegas or the modern-day corporate-run Vegas? Without further ado, let's dive into our first story.
Story number 1. I worked as a blackjack dealer at one of the Strip casinos in the mid-1970s. To this day, I'll tell anyone who asks, it was the safest, fairest time to gamble in Las Vegas, and it was all because of the mob. One night, I had a player sitting at my table who was clearly up to something. At first, it was little things, tugging at his sleeve, keeping his hands low near the felt. Then I noticed the way he slid his chips forward and pulled his hand back a little too quick. Classic sign of a past post, trying to add to your bet after you already know the outcome. I gave him a warning look, the kind every dealer knew, but he didn't stop. On his third try, before I could even call the pit boss, 2 men appeared out of nowhere. They weren't in uniforms, no name tags, just sharp suits, stone faces. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't embarrass him in front of the table. One leaned down and whispered something in his ear. The guy's face went pale. He left his chips behind, stood up, and walked out without a word. That was it. No paperwork, no hours of surveillance review, no cops dragging their feet. Just swift, quiet justice. And the rest of the players? They loved it because they knew the game was being protected. Compare that to today. If someone cheats, it's a whole ordeal. Security has to be called, cameras rewound, paperwork filled out, lawyers sometimes even brought in. It kills the vibe at the table. Guests sit there for 20 minutes watching the drama unfold. Back then, the mob's presence was enough to keep most people honest. And if you tried to cheat, you'd think twice after the way you got handled. Here's the thing a lot of people don't realize. The mob wanted the casinos to feel safe and fair. They knew tourists wouldn't come back if they felt hustled. So yeah, they took their cut, but they made damn sure everyone had a good time while they were there. To this day, when I walk into a corporate-run casino and see a cheater slowing everything down while security dithers with protocol, I shake my head. Under the mob, that guy would have been out the door before the cards were even shuffled for the next hand.
Let's pause for a second. If you're enjoying these wild Vegas stories, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more every week, and drop a comment below. I want to know your thoughts. What does it say about the current state of Vegas that people overwhelmingly seem to want the mob to take control of Vegas again? Do you personally think corporate-run Vegas is really that bad? Or do you think it's blown out of proportion and it's actually not that bad? I'm curious to hear your thoughts in the comments. All right, back to the stories. And this next one comes from a dealer who saw firsthand how the mob handled cheaters and troublemakers on the casino floor. Story 3. I was a cocktail waitress in Las Vegas in the late 1960s, back when the mob still ran the show. And I'll tell you straight, I've never seen hospitality like that before or since. My tray was never empty. Drinks flowed like water, and nobody ever asked me to slow it down. The bosses wanted everyone smiling, laughing, feeling like a big shot, whether they were betting $5 or $5,000. Here's the thing people don't realize. The mob didn't want angry customers. They wanted repeat customers. If a tourist came to my table and looked like they weren't having a good time, a pit boss would notice within minutes. He'd lean over and whisper, "Take care of them.
drinks are on us. Sometimes it wasn't just drinks. It was dinner, show tickets, even a room upstairs. All handed out like candy because keeping people happy meant they'd come back again and again. And safety? Let me put it this way. I never felt safer in my life. If a guest got handsy with me or started yelling, I didn't need to call security. I'd just give the pit boss a look, and within 60 seconds, that guy was gone. No big scene, no paperwork. He was just gone, and I never saw him again. Compare that to corporate Vegas today. Customers harass staff, and it turns into an hour of filling out reports, while the drunk who caused it gets a slap on the wrist. Back then, you didn't mess with the staff. The mob made sure of that. But it wasn't all fear. They looked out for us too. On more than one occasion, a pit boss would slip me an envelope of cash with a wink, saying, "For working hard tonight." Nobody clocked us in or out. Nobody micromanaged us. If you did your job and kept the customers happy, the mob made sure you went home with a smile. I know people hear Mafia and think of crime and violence, but from where I was standing, balancing a tray of cocktails on the casino floor, the mob made Vegas feel alive. Everyone had fun and everyone got taken care of. These corporations today, they'd charge you for the air you breathe if they could. The mob gave freely, and in return, Vegas had a soul. And I miss that soul every single day.
Story number 4. I'll never forget the bachelor party I went to in Las Vegas back in the late 1970s. There were 6 of us, all broke 20-somethings from the Midwest. We scraped together what money we had, hopped on a cheap flight, and figured we'd sleep 3 to a room if we had to. Honestly, we expected to blow through our bankroll the first night and spend the rest of the weekend wandering around. But Vegas in those days was a different animal. The Mafia wanted you to have the time of your life, whether you were rich or not, and that's exactly what happened to us. The first casino we hit, we sat down at a blackjack table with maybe a couple $100 each. We weren't high rollers by any stretch, but after a few hours of playing, the pit boss walked over with a big smile and said, "You boys hungry?" We figured he was joking. Next thing we know, we're sitting down to a steak dinner. Thick cuts of prime rib, baked potatoes, cocktails, all comped. No one asked if we had enough points or if we were part of some loyalty program. They just wanted us fed and happy. That night we went to see a show, the kind of act that would cost a fortune today. Back then, free tickets, on the house. Sinatra, Wayne Newton, the kind of big names that made Vegas sparkle. They treated us like VIPs, even though we were just a bunch of nobodies from out of town. Later that weekend, we ended up at a lounge bar where one of the guys in our group started chatting up the bartender. He mentioned we were in town for a bachelor party. The bartender grinned, disappeared for a minute, and came back with a bottle of champagne. He popped it right at our table and said, "Compliments of the house. Enjoy the weekend, fellas." That moment stuck with me because it wasn't about how much money we spent. It was about the experience. The mob wanted us to remember Vegas as the best weekend of our lives so that we'd come back again and again, maybe bring more friends next time. And it worked. I went back 3 times in the next 2 years. Now, compare that to what you get today. A bachelor party in Vegas costs thousands just to walk through the door of a nightclub. You'll wait in line for an hour, pay $20 for a watered-down cocktail, and if you want a table, get ready to drop a few grand on bottle service. And forget about comps unless you're losing 5 figures at the tables. Back then, the mob didn't care if you were betting nickels or hundreds. They knew happy tourists meant repeat customers, and they protected that reputation like their lives depended on it. That bachelor party, a trip we expected to be cheap and maybe a little trashy, turned into one of the most unforgettable weekends of my life. And it was all because the mob made sure every single person in Vegas, no matter how much they had, felt like a king.
Story number 5. I worked as a bartender on the Strip in the late 1960s and all through the 1970s. And let me tell you something, Vegas under the mob was nothing like it is today. Back then, my bar was always buzzing. Tourists, locals, even casino employees hanging around after their shifts. People would drop in for a whiskey or a martini, and before they finished their first glass, another one would already be on the way. Free. Always on the house. That was the system. Keep the drinks flowing, keep the people smiling, and they'll keep playing. I didn't have to argue with guests about drink tickets or minimum bets. Didn't matter if they were putting down 20 bucks on the slots or 500 at the blackjack table. Everyone felt taken care of. And when the mob ran things, the generosity didn't stop at the drinks. I saw pit bosses hand out steakhouse comps like candy, show tickets, room upgrades, even limo rides to the airport. One time, a young couple from Texas came in looking worn out and disappointed. Their luck had been terrible, and they told me they'd blown through their gambling money way too fast. I mentioned it to the floor manager, and within an hour, the couple was eating prime rib in the dining room and had a fresh room key slipped into their hands for an extra night stay. No charge. That wasn't charity. That was business. The mob understood something corporations today don't. If people leave happy, they'll come back. And when they come back, they'll bring friends, family, money, and more good word of mouth. And let me tell you, the atmosphere was electric. I knew the regulars by name. I'd pour them a drink, they'd tell me their wins or losses, and we'd laugh about it together. Even when the bosses walked through the room, people didn't tense up. They were treated with respect because the mob knew the lifeblood of Vegas wasn't just the whales dropping millions. It was the everyday people spending a few $100 to feel like they were part of the action. Today, you walk into a corporate casino and the warmth is gone. You can't even get a free cocktail at the bar without swiping a loyalty card. You're just a number in their system. And unless you're losing big money, they couldn't care less if you ever come back. I remember one of the old-timers I worked with saying, "Vegas is only alive as long as the people love it." The mob understood that. They protected it, sometimes with a heavy hand, sure, but they kept the magic alive. I watched the transition happen in the 80s and 90s. Slowly, the suits replaced the wise guys, the comps dried up, the free drinks got smaller and watered down. And the regulars, they stopped showing up. Vegas under the mob wasn't perfect, but it was personal. They knew your name, they knew what you drank, and they made sure you walked away with a story worth telling. That's why so many of us still say the city was better in the Mafia's hands.
Story number 6. I'll never forget the first time I hit a jackpot in Las Vegas. It was 1976, I was in my 20s, and I'd saved up for months just to afford the trip. I wasn't a high roller by any stretch. I was a slot player. Most of the time, you feed in your quarters and watch them disappear. But that night, my luck finally turned. The machine lit up, the bells rang, and people all around me stopped to look. I just hit $10,000. $10,000 in the 70s. That was more than I made in a year at my job back home. My hands started shaking so bad I could barely stand up. I was excited, sure, but also terrified. That kind of money draws attention, and in a place like Vegas, you never know who's watching. That's when 2 men in suits appeared at my side. They weren't casino employees in uniforms. No name tags, no smiles for the crowd, just sharp suits, slick hair, and an aura that told you not to mess around. My first thought was, uh-oh, here comes the shakedown. I'd heard the stories. But instead of threatening me, one of them leaned in close and said, "Relax, kid, you're safe with us." They didn't let anyone crowd me. They cleared a path through the floor, walked me straight to the cashier's cage, and stood behind me while the attendant counted out every last dollar. Not chips, not a voucher, actual cash stacked in neat bundles. When I stuffed it all into a leather bag, the guy on my left gave me a nod. "We'll walk you out," he said. They escorted me out of the casino, past gawkers and drunks, straight to the cab line. One even opened the door for me like I was some kind of VIP. The last thing he said before I slid into the back seat was, "Tell your friends Vegas takes care of winners." Then they disappeared back inside just as quick as they had appeared. I'll tell you something, I never once felt unsafe in that moment, even carrying what was basically a year's salary in cash, because the mob made sure of it. They wanted winners to go home with a story. Imagine the word of mouth. A kid hits a jackpot in Vegas, walks away untouched, and tells everyone back home how the casino protected him. That was marketing you couldn't buy. Now compare that to today.
You hit a big win, and the first thing they do is bury you in paperwork. Then you wait an hour or two for a payout while security hovers around looking nervous. When you finally get your money, usually in a check or a voucher instead of cash, you're on your own. Nobody's walking you to a cab. Nobody's watching your back if some shady character follows you out to the parking garage. You're just another customer in the system. But in the mob days, you weren't just a customer. You were their guest, and guests were protected. I'll always remember those two men in suits, materializing out of nowhere, making me feel like the most important guy in Vegas for one night. That was the difference. The Mafia didn't just run casinos. They ran the experience, and they knew that keeping winners safe wasn't just good hospitality, it was good business.
Story number 7. I spent nearly a decade as a showgirl in Las Vegas during the 1970s, and to this day, I'll tell anyone who asks, the mob era was the golden age. You can show me all the fancy nightclubs and mega resorts of today, but it doesn't compare to the magic we had back then. And I don't just say that out of nostalgia, I lived it. Being a showgirl was like being part of Vegas royalty. We wore these massive feathered headdresses, sequined costumes that sparkled under the stage lights, and we danced in front of packed audiences night after night. Tourists would come from all over the world just to see the shows. And the mob bosses? They made sure we were taken care of. Our pay was steady, the dressing rooms were stocked with champagne and snacks, and if a guest got handsy or disrespectful, he didn't get a second chance. Security didn't just show him the door. The word banned in those days meant banned forever. One night, after a particularly big show, a pit boss came backstage with this group of guys from out of town. They looked like factory workers, tired, rough hands, the kind of guys who'd clearly saved up all year just for this trip. He asked if we'd be willing to pose for photos with him. Of course we did. We wrapped our arms around them, kissed their cheeks, handed them signed programs. They were grinning like kids on Christmas morning. Before they left, the pit boss slipped each of them a ticket to the steakhouse. On the house. Those guys probably went home and told everyone they knew that they spent the weekend in Vegas hanging out with showgirls and eating steak like big shots. That's exactly what the mob wanted. And they knew how to treat us, too. I remember one of the bosses, I won't name him, but let's just say he was well connected, walking through the dressing room one night. He didn't leer or make crude comments. He just said, "You ladies are the stars of this town. Don't let anyone tell you different." That stuck with me, because it was true. The mob understood that the shows, the performers, the glamour, that was what kept Vegas special. After our performances, we'd sometimes be invited to join guests for drinks. Always supervised, always respectful. The bosses made sure of that. If a tourist got too rowdy or crossed the line, one raised eyebrow from a floor manager and he was gone. No arguments, no debates. The guests knew not to push their luck. The thing I miss most is the sense of fantasy. Every tourist who came to Vegas in those days felt like they were stepping into another world, and we showgirls were part of that illusion. We made middle-class folks from Kansas feel like they were rubbing elbows with Hollywood stars. We made ordinary couples feel glamorous, even if only for a night. And the mob encouraged it because they knew that sending someone home with that memory was worth more than anything. That's what kept people coming back. Today, when I walk the Strip, I barely recognize it. The shows now are expensive productions, sure, but they feel corporate, sanitized. The performers are talented, but they're part of a machine. Back in the 70s, there was intimacy. You'd see us on stage one minute, then sipping a cocktail with a tourist the next. The whole town felt connected. I remember one bachelor party from out east. A bunch of young guys, loud, full of energy. After the show, the casino gave them free champagne and brought them backstage to meet us. They were respectful, polite, just thrilled to be there. We ended up laughing, dancing, and taking photos that they probably kept for the rest of their lives. I guarantee you, those guys went home and said they'd had the best weekend of their lives in Vegas. And that wasn't by accident. The mob engineered it. And here's the part people forget. The mob didn't just protect the tourists. They protected us, too. They made sure the performers were safe, well-fed, and looked after. If someone ever crossed the line with a showgirl, word got around fast, and that person was never welcome back.
You can't say the same thing today, where it feels like everything is run by accountants more worried about quarterly profits than about people. Vegas was personal back then. We weren't selling drinks or tickets, we were selling dreams. And the mob understood that better than anyone. It's why so many of us who lived through it still say the same thing. Las Vegas was better in the Mafia's hands, because the city cared about you whether you were a tourist, an employee, or just someone trying to make a memory. I'll never forget the feathers, the lights, the laughter echoing backstage, but more than that, I'll never forget the way the mob made everyone, from showgirls to tourists to bartenders, feel like they mattered. And that's what made Vegas magical. And that's what's missing now.
And there you have it, 7 stories straight out of mob-era Las Vegas. Whether you were a tourist, a dealer, a bartender, or even a showgirl, one thing was clear. The Mafia wanted you to leave town with a smile and a story worth telling. Sure, it wasn't perfect. The mob ran a tight ship, and they weren't exactly saints. But compared to today's corporate casinos, a lot of people will tell you Vegas felt alive back then. It was personal, it was magical, and it belonged to everyone. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Las Vegas really was better under the Mafia's hands? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, and make sure to subscribe for more stories every single week. Because trust me, I've got plenty more wild confessions from the city that never sleeps.